Hello.
Good morning, good evening.
Good evening. Good morning.
Well, welcome to the podcast, and it's so exciting to get to reflect with you both. It's been, more than a decade I've known you guys,
Hmm.
and been so impressed with your staying power, something that sometimes is lacking in midwifery partnerships and in practice and in birth centers. And so that was my main drive to talk with you. But of course, you're both so dynamic, have had these long careers, and I kind of want to get to know you both a little more. So let's start with introductions. Why don't you
No.
tell us who you are, where you are, and what you're all about?
Petra, do you want to start or do you want me to?
Sure, I'll start.
Okay.
So I'm Petra Prostrednik and I live in Portland, Oregon. Our birth center, Bella Vie Gentle Birth Center, is in Salem, which is about an hour or so from my house. And let's see, I'm trying to think of all the things. Go ahead, Desiree. I'm having a mental block. I
I
I'll
forgot.
kind of
ask you
think
more.
we
Don't
should have
worry.
introduced each other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
why don't you
should.
do that? All right, Desiree, add to Petra. Tell us more about her.
Petra's a fantastic wife and mother. She has four daughters, two of whom are grown, two of whom are tweens or teens. She's also a cat mom, and she is the reason our business is still open because of her way to make finances work. That's what I'll say.
Mm,
I do
we'll dig
magic
into
And
that
she's
more. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
and
dig into
she's
that more.
organized. Like all of my
Mhm.
disorganized, she pulls into something that works.
That's beautiful. Well, Des, do you want to start with yours and then Petra can fill in any spots too?
Sure, sure. Okay, so I'm Desiree LeFave. I am a midwife, a CPM, and have been since 2001. I'm also a wife and mom. I'm faithful. I have a lot of drive for maternal and child health. And I do some jobs that focus on that. So one of the things I do is I am the co-committee chair for the Industry Relations Committee for the American Association of Birth Centers and a board member on the Oregon Association of Birth Centers, which you founded a long time ago. And I have been since you founded it, actually.
Yep.
Um, and what else? I feel like there's something I'm missing. Oh, I live in Snohomish, Washington. So I don't live near our birth center anymore. We both lived near the birth center for about a decade, and my husband's job moved us up here. So I visit sometimes and work on, not for the birth center at this point.
Hmm. That's very cool. Let's introduce the birth center now. So when did Bella Vie open? What was the inspiration? How long has it been open? All the things.
Yeah. Well, Desiree was my midwife.
Love
Actually,
that.
another birth center. My baby that she was the midwife for is now 20, going on 21. So
Wow.
that was how we met initially. And my experience, so my first baby was born in the hospital, and it was not a horror story, you hear a lot of those, but it was definitely not what I kind of signed up for. I interviewed a lot of midwives. I was really clear what I wanted, and I thought I found the right place. And in the end, it's like all the things that I was hoping for kind of went out the window. I wasn't heard. I was like actually pushing my baby out. They didn't believe me. So then they had me not push for like almost an hour before the midwife arrived and were holding my legs together, telling me not to push, that sort of thing. So um, it wasn't the best experience. And so with my second baby, I knew I wanted something different. And I went to a birth center and I was blessed to have Desiree as my midwife. And we became friends and we're actually in the same town. We ended up living in the same community. And I think my husband actually ran into you, Desiree, at like Fred Meyer at a store, at a grocery
In the
store.
produce department, yep.
Yeah. And I was just really inspired and empowered by my two very different birth experiences. I knew that I wanted to do this work at the time, and I was thinking at the time as a doula. And so I kind of went down that path and I attended a couple of hospital births because, that's often where doulas are most needed, although they're needed everywhere. But back then. It was really primarily at the hospital. And the hospital clients that I had, I went home crying. I would go to these births and I would go home crying because I just witnessing what they were going through, and there was only so much I could do, and it just was really, really difficult. And I think I just had one of those really difficult births, where there was actually two of us as doulas. It was a teen mom, and it was really very heartbreaking the way that they treated her. In either case, my husband ran into you at Fred Meyer and kind of realized that you lived in Newburgh, I think, and mentioned, I mean, I guess you should say what he mentioned because I wasn't there, but essentially came home and was like, you need to work with Desiree. Essentially, right?
So, Augustine, you know how doula can be a gateway career, right?
Oh, completely. Yes, it is the gateway drug for sure.
So then I was like, well, certainly she wants to be a midwife if she's a doula. So I just kind of said that I was looking for another assistant to be the third at births.
You had just started your home birth practice.
That's right.
In our town. And
so I was having my third baby. I wanted to step back from the busy birth center life for a little while. And I was creating a small home birth practice in our community. And I just ended up thinking, well, I need a third at the births. I'd been looking for someone. Petra would be the perfect person to do that. And, of course, you know how you get to know your clients. And so anyway, he went home and said that. And so she was like, well, okay. And kind of, we started working together. And it was really organic the way it went. And she did all her training and then knew after that, and I'll let you speak for yourself, but she knew she didn't want to miss all the things that she had missed. It just turned out in the training, as it tends to be. I feel like God kind of serves up what we need in our apprenticeship, and she missed like every family birthday and holiday.
It was like Christmas, my birthday, my husband's birthday, my kids' birthday. It was all the things in that first year. And I realized
in a small practice.
Yeah, in a small practice. It wasn't even busy. It would just, happened to be that it landed on those dates. And I just realized like, my babies are really little and I would like to not miss all the important, milestones and dates and whatnot. And I started talking about a birth center, and Desiree was like, no way. I don't want to open a birth center.
Classic.
Because, well, she had been at a birth center, but part of the thing that I think that Desiree, we keep speaking for each other, that this is kind of how we roll. One of the things that Desiree really didn't want to focus on was the administrative part. And for me, I was happy to take that on because that would allow me to be there, with my littles at the time. Right. So I think that's where kind of it started to shift. And then Desiree started talking about, she became a little bit more on board and then more on board. And then I kind of got cold feet. And so then I was saying no. And we kind of did this dance for a bit before I think we finally both said yes on the same day and decided to start looking at places. Well, like, what would that look like? If we were to do this, where would it be? What would that look like? And we just found this property. It was the first place that I think your mom actually found.
My mom found it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just really felt like the place. And so we were taking our time to look at other places, but we kept going back to that location. And interestingly enough, we ended up making an offer on this place, and they actually said no because they thought that we couldn't make it happen.
And we were like 30 and 33 with babies on both hips. Like, there was, right. I think they were kind of like, you're not going to be able to buy this place because it wasn't really in our personal price ranges. Right. So,
well, they were like retirement age and they called us girls and just didn't feel like we could make it happen. And we needed a little bit of a longer closing period in order to kind of jump through some hoops. And I think that kind of scared them off and they just didn't think we could do it. So we were like, okay, well, that didn't pan out. So we kept we kept looking at other locations. And was it 3 months later they came back? They circled back around and they were like, they called, they hadn't sold it. And they said, hey, are you guys still wanting to are you still, do you consider this place as your place? And so we did, and we jumped on that opportunity, and Bella Vie was born. That was in 2000. Well, that was in 2006. And then it took, or was that early 2007? It took us about a year.
We closed in March of 2007.
Yeah.
And but we first looked at it in 2006, and we needed a 90-day closing because we had a conditional use permit to do business in the country, because Petra's vision originally was to have a country birth center. She really wanted the kind of country acreage community sort of.
It's a place that people can get away from the busyness of, all the noise.
It's so beautiful. I've been there several times. It's such a gorgeous spot.
Thank you.
Oregon has this very established birth center culture, and even birth center owners from Oregon go there and they're like, wow, it's like a different level. So like, before you tell us how like it evolved, tell me like, really, what was the inspiration? Because at the time you guys dialed it up. Like you added this two things. Number one is that you chose to be in this very country setting, which is different than what was happening at the time, which was like birth centers were being started next to hospitals just in case, and you guys chose to be really, not really rural. I mean, it's like what, 10, 15 minutes or something from your community center?
It's 20 minutes from our hospital. Mm-hmm.
20 minutes from your hospital. So you chose to be like really purposefully in this rural setting.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you did is you, took design and dialed it up a notch. And so tell us about the design inspiration and the location inspiration.
Yeah,
so thanks. Oh, sorry, Desiree.
No, go.
The location piece, it was less about us. Like, we didn't go into it thinking, let's be really rural. Like that wasn't our intention, but we really wanted to serve both communities. And so where we are, we're located between two small-ish towns. Salem's, I guess, pretty good size, but there was a need in like McMinnville and Amity and all of these smaller communities. And so in order for us to really be able to serve both, all sides of the communities there, it made sense for us to be in that particular location. So we didn't go into it thinking, I did have this idea of the country and, wanting it to be peaceful and that sort of thing, but we didn't necessarily, plan on it being quite as far from both hospitals, but it's worked out really well.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And as far as the design, that's more Desiree.
So we, tore off of the building two kind of add-ons. One of them wasn't code, and both of them just didn't work for a birth center. And we had a build out done to create the water birth center that was matched, because it's an 1860s farmhouse that we bought. It's actually two houses that we bought, and one of them's 1860s, one of them's 1900. The one that's 1900 worked because in order to do conditional use in Oregon in an exclusively farming area, which is where we are, we were required to have somebody who works for us live on the land. That was one of the requirements. So for us, it was like, well, somebody can live in this house, because we didn't want somebody living in the birth center. We felt like that could lack professionalism, and it just didn't feel like what we were looking for. So when we did the build out, it was on the 1860s home, and it created, like, it was supposed to be look like the rest of the building, and it does fit quite well with it. My mother is an interior designer, or she's retired now, but she was an interior designer. And so we basically said, because, of course, at the time we were on a bit of a shoestring, right? And not a bit, because actually we both had put money in, and because we were in our young 30s and didn't have a lot of extra cash, we took money out of our homes to do it. And that was back in the day that you could be like, I make this much money, and they'd give you a loan, and thank God, because we might have been in trouble. So anyway, we took money out of our homes, put it into the building. The build out kind of went terribly because the contractor was struggling with some different things. And he had too many jobs going and didn't put enough effort into ours, and would have people do the jobs that, we ended up having to fire him and start over with a lot of things. So we spent an extra $50,000.
And for example, water would need to travel uphill to go down in the shower. And it was, you know,
We weren't being picky, let me just say.
this isn't us
But
doing, this was
no.
really, there were issues, lots of them. We had to re-chisel out the handicap ramp that
Oh
went.
my God.
It was
I don't know if
awful.
this is making me feel bad or good. I'm at the tail end of a build out in the birth center right now. And I'm
Right.
having like
I
these
saw
kind of
that.
panic attacks right now.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Yes.
Construction. Mhm.
It's a process. You know
So
how that goes.
okay. So wait, I said we spent an extra 50,000. We each spent an extra 50,000.
Yeah.
So we
Oh,
both came
geez.
in with 50,000 and then we needed 100 each.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
it was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? You know, and there was a time.
Oh, you're probably gonna say what I was just gonna say. There was a time
Yeah.
that we were gonna close before we opened the door. There was
Oh
truly
my
a
goodness.
moment where we both were like, how in the world are we going to do this?
Yeah.
I feel
And
your
our
pain.
families did
I
a
feel
little,
your pain.
yeah. And our families did a little rescuing of us. I have to say, we got a loan
Mhm.
and we had extra work done. You know, some of what we were getting done was done by family. And so we ended up then so we told my mom, you have $5,000 to decorate this whole place. And somehow the magic happened. And it was, you know, because it's 4,000 square feet. And just, you know, we bought like beautiful used things and it just worked out. We were super
That's
thankful.
amazing.
Well, and back
It's amazing.
17 years ago, 5,000 went further, you know, for
Sure.
sure.
True.
Yeah.
Still,
True.
it was
True,
still a
true.
very big ask, and she did deliver, which we were so grateful for.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so was it truly 17 years ago?
Yeah, we opened in May 17 years ago and got fully licensed in August. And so that's why we just had our 17th birthday. So this is our 18th year of being open. We did prenatals there first in May, but couldn't have births there until August.
Wow. Well, a huge congratulations. I mean, it's such an inspiration. I don't know if so many people know the statistics, but like something like every single week a birth center closes in the United States. It's about every week a new birth center opens too. But when you look at the numbers over the last decade, we've remained fairly consistent. Like even though birth centers keep opening, we're not really growing the numbers nationally. And that's why I really wanted to talk to you both, because it's so necessary that we create these spaces, these safe spaces for birth, but that we also create these employment opportunities for midwives. And over the years, you've had staff and you've created, these job opportunities for midwives that don't want to go and do what you did and start their own thing. And that's really essential for growing the workforce. And I guess it's such an inspiration, and I'd love it if you gave our listeners more advice or more insight, or, how are you so sustainable? What has made it work?
Yeah, thank you. Well, there's several things I think. Well, I think having a business partner works so well because, there are moments when you just don't have the bandwidth and the other one it's like tag, and then they're the one in the ring. And it's kind of, we have done that over and over again with each other. Like, I really need to focus on this child or do this thing for my family or take a vacation actually, or, all of those things. And so I think probably, having a work wife that works really well with who you are, and it doesn't also, I think it was helpful that we were in so deep financially that when we did have a conflict come up, which happened in 2010, we had a big conflict. And, if it would have been easy to divorce at that time, we would have done it. And we both feel that way. And we were super blessed to be in too deep too, actually. Like, we both at the time were like, oh my gosh, it'd be easier to get out of our marriages, because like it truly was, like, because then you've taken on all these clients and they're all counting on you. It's, I mean, not emotionally easier, right? But we were stuck and we had to work it out, and we did, and we actually sought a kind of counselor mediator, and she ended up working with us for a while, and we ended up being like better friends and better business partners after that, and realizing we were each other's family at that point. Like, we were
Wow.
chosen family. And it just really, now I think one thing about the way we work is we know each other so well personally and we really care about each other's kids so much. They're like, we're the other mama for those kids. And it matters a lot to making it all work, I think. Also, I would say, because there's two of us and our birth center is so solid at this point, we've been able to have me work on the business and work on things nationally. So like becoming the IRC co-chair was a big step because it meant Petra took part of my load and we hired out part of my load. And so in order to do that, like, I don't know if you're aware, Augustine, have you heard of the project that we're doing with insurance companies nationally to try to get birth centers paid better and more sustainably?
I think I've heard whispers, but I can't say specifically. So please share.
Yeah, so it's something that myself and Laura Wiegand, who's the other co-committee chair for IRC, and then also Rebecca Orton, who is a birth center owner and a doula and a nurse. And she owns Astoria Birth Center. Laura Wiegand owns the Andalus Water Birth Center in Portland now. She's the one who bought that and is a member. She's one of the partners for Birth Partners, if you know them. They own a number of birth centers around the nation. And so it just so happens that us as 3 Oregon birth center owners who happen to have sort of different specialties, like mine as a midwife and somebody who connects people, and really, I think relationship tends to be easy for me. And
Well, you have
Rebecca,
the history of having this birth center too. So we've gone through the ups and downs with insurance companies. So that perspective has helped a lot too.
yep, and just the long historical kind of Oregon perspective with Medicaid and all the different things that they've kind of put us through in Oregon. And then Rebecca was a molecular biologist and she ran a parasitology lab at Harvard and is super data focused. And so that was her first career. Then she had babies and became a doula and decided to open a birth center and then needed a nurse. So she became a nurse. And so like she's that person. And then Laura has an executive MBA and she's been administrator at hospitals and also owns Birth Partners now and became really connected with out of hospital birth and physiologic birth, so empowering birth. And between the 3 of us, it's a really good combination of being able to work on this project. And of course, the goal is maternal health, right? Like it's the maternal health crisis. And we know that birth centers and midwives are a huge answer to maternal health. And so, when you look at the hospital numbers, I should say the national numbers, which are of course largely hospital. It's 22.1, I think, is the last year for per 100,000 people who are pregnant succumb to pregnancy or birth or postpartum. And so when you look at that number and you assume it's mostly in hospitals, there's actually a birth center number like this. And that is that it's 0.7 per 100,000 moms are lost to pregnancy, birth, or postpartum. And it's so astronomically different. And, we know there's so many issues.
Would you just say those numbers again so that they're really clear, the difference?
Yeah, I think 22.1 for 100,000 moms are lost in the United States. And that ends up being it depends on the year you look at in the most recent years, but between like 700 and 1,100 or 1,200 moms die every year. And so it's a couple or 3 a day. Don't go home to their families. And in birth centers, that same 100,000, it's 0.7 that are lost. So, we're outperforming hospitals in maternal health profoundly. I mean, there's different things you have to look at with this, right? One of them is that we take low risk clients. But even in like the Strong Start data, where we compare low risk to low risk, we still have a profoundly better maternal outcome. And so it's something that insurance companies are noticing because so many of them are realizing this crisis and they're focusing on this. And we're presenting this information to them, not just this, but what birth centers provide and the amount that we can provide it for and all those things, but that they've got to pay birth centers equitably in order to be able to let them stay open and thrive. And, we also know that among nurse midwives, it is the lowest paid nurse practitioner there is. And we know that midwives become midwives and stay midwives for a very short amount of time. And it doesn't make sense for the other, nurse practitioners. That's not happening with them. It's the underpaid, overworked kind of mentality that comes along with it. And so Petra and I talked about this, decided let's, because this is really important to us, especially acknowledging the disparities in regard to Black and brown women and just, some of the things that we can't deny as a nation and that we need to stop not making a priority, right? And like we know women aren't a priority in the same way that they should be. And we know that this is a huge problem. And so we decided, okay, I'm going to start working on those things. I'm super inspired to work on these things. And so Petra kind of holds down the fort while I do this project for the most part. And I work, for the birth center in other ways too, right? Like I do the birth center's contracts with our billing team. I kind of audit our billing and do, the things to help. I help with midwife support and different things like that still, but it's not to the extent that I used to do those, the other jobs I did. And so it's been really good actually to do this project. And we've gotten birth centers. I know our birth center I can speak for, but birth centers in general, in some cases, the contracts have doubled and beyond. And so we are continuing that project for another about 1.5 years. It's a 3-year project. And we're really excited about it because we feel like then birth centers become sustainable. And, the state of Oregon, somebody that works for the state of Oregon Medicaid recently told me that they expect 1/3 of rural hospitals in the West to close in the next 3 years. And so we think about that and we think, where are all these people going to go? Where can people have safe babies? Because we also know that when you take away competition, you drive down quality. And the last thing we need to do for people's birth experiences is drive down quality. So it's just something we are really focused on and inspired to do and excited about the outcomes that are happening from it.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely been in that position numerous times throughout the last 17 years where we've considered closing ourselves because of this, same issue. And
yeah, well, you guys know that's my story. I closed my birth centers in Oregon because of the unsustainable pay gap.
And we've definitely been there. We've had that conversation. I think that having partnership, in some ways, it's more challenging because, of course, there are two owners to pay. So there's more, you need to make up for that. But then also there is the part where on that day that I'm saying, I can't do this anymore, Desiree's like, yes, we can. And this is why. And then there's the days that, vice versa, where, you're feeling spent or just really discouraged. And it's like, the other person is there to like lift us back up. And so thankfully, I mean, it's kind of like any marriage, as long as you don't both say, okay, to quitting on the same day, you kind of keep plugging forward. And we've done that. And in the very beginning, when we started, Desiree was the midwife. She was running the practice. I was running the business. And so when she moved up to Washington and she was no longer spending all those hours midwifing, it kind of allowed for some other avenues and for us to really look at creative ways to be able to stay open. Like we've really had to do that over time. And we have found that really at the end of the day, we need to be getting reimbursed fairly. And that is where we need to have our efforts, focus our efforts, because that way there's going to be more access for families, which is really important. And the more birth centers that close, I mean, this is, continuously the issue, right? Like people can only stay open for so long. They do it for the right reasons. Their heart is in the work, but they can't keep it going. So, so that's been kind of.
So I just want to jump in here and say, this is such an interesting place, and I'm sure you guys see it and work with this too, but like being paid an equitable wage requires you to understand that you have value and worth first. And that's been an interesting place for me to work with the consultant midwives that I do talk to, because I think kind of universally midwives have this low self-worth and they don't feel like they are owed what I think now you consider a living wage, an equitable wage, however they're phrasing it. And I guess I want to sort of press on that point with you too and say, like, how did you get to the point where you're like $8, $10, $12,000 is a global fee, not 4,000 or whatever? Use the example that works for you. How did you get to that point?
Well, we had years where we didn't take wages, actually. No, actually, you know what? When we first opened Bella Vie and we started billing, we billed like the hospital, and insurances paid us like the hospital. And
Well, so
it was,
how did you do that? Because so many people don't. Like, what was the key to that?
I think we charged the right price. Like we charged.
Yeah, but how did you know what the right price was? Like, how did you value yourself? Like, we're doing the same as the hospital. Like, how did that click?
I mean, in my mind, I feel like we're doing more than the hospital. You know, we're not doing these in and out drive-through appointments where you're getting just moments of their time. We're taking the time to really be with our clients. We get to know them, we're not just checking on, them and baby and, taking their vitals. We're really connecting with them as people and how are they doing emotionally? Well, what is their nutrition like? How can we help them, find ways to improve their nutrition? And all of those things matter so much.
Yeah, I think this is one of the main benefits of having a client be a part of the designing process, right? Is because Petra, you at the very beginning knew the value in your own body, heart, mind, soul. And so you couldn't let it be undervalued because you knew what value it was.
100%. I did both.
Mm-hmm.
I had the experience of both. And so I knew absolutely that what we were offering was far superior to what I received in a hospital setting.
Right.
And what, others receive. I mean, not that, there's a time and a place for hospitals, right? Like not to.
Absolutely.
We both feel really strongly and are really grateful for the hospital support. And we have a good relationship with our backup hospital. We worked really hard for that as well. That was a priority for us from the beginning, and with the paramedics that come. And we really work hard to have good relationships so that it can be a streamlined process for our families so that they feel well taken care of when they need it. And they trust that they will get good care there as well with our support.
Well, and I do have to say, just since you mentioned that, I feel like one of the reasons that this has worked is because we have such an awesome community, right? Like we have this, like the medics in our area are managed by really humble, nice people that want to do the right thing by patients. And, for them, patients, for us, clients. But then the hospital in our area, we used to go to one hospital and then another hospital that we didn't want to go to originally really improved what they were doing. And it's hard to know, like, did they improve because people started expecting it? Like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And then they asked us to start transferring to them. And at the time I said, and this was one of the NICU doctors that asked me, as the second in charge at the NICU at the time. And I said, we will bring 3 people there. And if you treat them like queens, we'll come back. And they did. They were awesome. And since then, even like the hospital that we go to, it's Salem Hospital, they're a good place to have babies. And they're so spacious with information. I can go there and chart review. The hospitalists, the OB hospitalists are great. The NICU is great. And we just really appreciate them so much. So then it's kind of like, I wonder, I hear about midwives opening birth centers and having just the hospital just down on them constantly, causing legal trouble, turning them in for things that they are like normal. And I just think, I don't know if, because the way we started was I asked our backup doctor at the time from my little home birth practice, which it was Alan Hedges. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah,
He was a
remember.
naturopath turned OB to be a good backup for home births. And that was his inspiration originally. And he was so like, we wanted to know if he would supported our project, and he did. And it just was like, we approached them. We went to the medics. He went with me the first time to do the sort of training of the medics in the area for emergency childbirth. And it just was like, we were so supported and just like put our selves forward facing to them from the beginning. And they've been awesome. And I feel like we have good relationships with them. It's not that nothing ever comes up that we have to talk about, but it's truly, they've been really great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Often there's a new doctor there that doesn't have that relation, like doesn't, we haven't met with yet, then that's sometimes when there's something that comes up. But as soon as we're never shy to bring it up and ask for, a conversation to happen. And it's
Well, I
always,
think so much has happened in the last 20 years, like compared to when we started to now. I mean, I'm hearing stories in Arizona and Colorado and even Philadelphia, where hospitals, especially outside of big metropolitan cities, are doing the right thing and are reaching out to birth centers. And it's inspiring to see that change. It's not coming fast, but it's awesome that you guys helped, create that in your community.
Yeah,
What
thank you.
else? What else has been responsible? Yeah. Yeah, go
I
for
think
it.
that would be advice for somebody opening a birth center is start there. Like let them know
Yeah.
and put your best self forward and just show them what you're going to do and that your goal is to support, people having the birth they want and that sometimes that'll need to include the hospital for safety and that you're committed to, a collegial professional relationship. So what else? Petra, what else?
I think one of the biggest things as far as partnership is concerned, because kind of back to that original question, I agree with Desiree. One of the most valuable things that's happened to us is having conflict, because we learned early on how to handle it. We went to therapy just like any good marriage. Marriage counseling is helpful to do early on before you have some big, huge issues. I mean, we did kind of wait till we had a big, huge issue, but we were able to go through it. And then it's kind of set us up for, we learned how to communicate with one another. We learned, all these things that were just so important. We also learned through that process, I think, that our differences, we are very different people. I mean, obviously we have enough in common to have wanted to jump into this venture together, but we are very different people. But those differences are actually what make us stronger as a partnership. And so instead of looking at each other's differences as like a frustration, we really learned that we each have different strengths and different, things that we can bring to different skill sets, all the things we can bring to the business. And to really value that in each other and trust each other in that way, and to learn to divide and conquer. Because in the beginning, every decision that we made was like together, like everything had to be together, and it just was a lot of, I don't know, time.
Duplication. Yeah.
And so I think eventually we learned to, again, back to that trust piece of like learning that, there are the things that we know, like if it's a big enough thing, we're going to talk about it together, but there's plenty of things that we can divide and conquer and just trust that the other person is going to make the best choice. And doing that has allowed us to do things like what Desiree is working on now with, on a much bigger scale, not just for our birth center, but for others as well. And so that learning to divide and conquer, I think, is huge. And that's one of the benefits of having a business partner, because you can't split yourself in half. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, looking to the future, is Bella Vie gonna stay on for a long, long time? Are you looking to sell? Well, what is your kind of vision for the future?
It's so funny you should ask
Open
that, 'cause
more?
we've been having conversations about this and like, just because of our sort of, I have 9 years until my husband retires. And I think, what is this going to look like? And, Petra and I both are like, we get a lot done and it's interesting to imagine retiring. I'm sure there'll still be projects, but we do want to kind of be purposeful because the birth center means so much to us. The community means so much to us. We know a lot of people, have their babies with us, and it matters where, that we're there. And so we've been really trying to decide how to move forward with that. We have 2 fantastic practice managers right now that I think we would feel safe with it in their hands. We are open to selling. I know some birth centers sell to the hospital, some birth centers sell to investors, whatever. We don't know yet what that would look like. And if, we don't know exactly what we're going to do, but we kind of think about the possibilities. So it was interesting when you were talking about the land and the birth center itself, how beautiful it is. And I kind of rolled my eyes like, oh man, because we've kind of been talking about considering moving away from being in an 1860s farmhouse, because it comes with a lot of challenges, you know.
Mhm.
And we also, the vast majority of our clients are from Salem, the Salem area. And so it does make sense in some ways, like, oh, should we move that direction maybe? And will that sort of increase access? And one thing I didn't mention about me is that I work at a birth center here. It's why my screen was turning occasionally, because they're trying to get a hold of me right now. I said, this was the 1 hour this week I couldn't be called, but they are really busy. And they've been a really great place to work. It's actually a really fun place to work. And it's interesting to be at a really busy birth center, because our birth center is a medium-sized birth center. And this is a large birth center. And it's kind of amazing to look at the way that we can apply the midwifery model to a much busier practice and do it in a way that is not the same as Bella Vie. It's not the boutique health that Bella Vie is, but it is still serving a lot of people having really great births and physiologic births. And so, you know, as Petra and I kind of talk through this project and maternal health and you know, how to help more people have what they want and birth, it does kind of make us think about, like, is this a direction that birth centers are going to move and midwives are going to move? You know, because we also know that there's a hiring problem. We feel it. It's hard to find people to work in birth centers. And, you know, employing nurse midwives, when the hospital, we employ them, we pay them everything we can, and then the hospital plucks them out after they have a good year or two of experience. And we've had somebody else go to births with them for a year. It's hugely expensive for us. And also, we love every one of them. We've worked with great midwives, and to have them have to leave, and we understand why. It's no shade on them. It's just a matter of, like, the realities of life and living in, you know, these times financially. And it feels like applying kind of a bigger setting maybe makes sense in some ways. And, you know, we also don't want to lose what Bella Vie has. So we'd probably find something that's a bit of a hybrid, right? We don't want to lose that really sweet community feel and the boutique kind of health. And also, I see the value in what they're doing here, knowing that a third of hospitals that are rural will be closing in in the West and things like that. We think, how can we do it in a way that's going to meet all these needs? And, you know, I was mentioning to you Black and brown women, as far as health disparities are concerned, we know from the Strong Start data and other data that they're way safer in birth centers. And so, like, disparities mostly go away when they go to birth centers. And so, you know, this is something that is on our minds. We don't know what we're going to do yet. We may keep it exactly as it is. And
having a separate location that's a little bit closer to town, and having it be, you know, like a prenatal and classroom space. But we talked about that idea. We've talked about lots of different. One other thing that we've talked about as an idea potentially is to consider at some point selling the practice, but keeping the birth center. You know, because we are further, you know, we both have moved away and we're not there on the day-to-day anymore. Perhaps somebody else would want to take on running the practice, but we would retain the birth center business and work together. I mean, you know, our success would be dependent on their success and vice versa. And so it would be kind of a partnership, really, with somebody to, you know, kind of work together. And so it'd be bringing in almost like another business partner to keep it going. And so that's something considered as well. It's, you know, as we want to slow down and as we look at kind of the years ahead when we want to retire, maybe that could be, because both of us really love what we have, and we're not really ready to step away yet. It takes so much, as you know, birth center owners as well. It's so much work that how do you do both?
That's been my current strategy with birth centers that call me in crisis. Is I'm like, let's split the practice and the facility. And it seems to be a really good strategy. I think that's smart.
Yeah. And, you know, I think, you know, what we do know is that we're not going to close it. I think it means too much to the community, and we're going to keep it the sweet Bella Vie that it is. No matter what the changes are, there are certain things that we're absolutely committed to preserving. And so I'm thankful that we're on the same page, you know, with all these things. And we're going to just keep taking the pulse of the community and determining what birth sort of needs are in regard to equity, and also in regard to just our community kind of the numbers and things like that, and we'll act accordingly. We're not going to do anything fast. We don't need to, and as it stands now, we're just kind of still keeping, our finger on the pulse.
Well, that's inspiring. What you've done is very inspiring.
Thank you.
Well, as we wrap up, any last pieces of advice you have for fellow birthpreneurs out there?
Oh man, do it. No regrets.
Do it.
I would say don't sign poor contracts.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the biggest. Know your worth.
Yeah.
Number one. And, really uphold that, expect that, have that expectation, because it's worth every single penny. And if you know what hospitals make, then you don't feel quite as, I think that's when really it hit. It was like, oh, they're giving us, like such a small fraction of what other hospitals get paid.
Well, and that came out recently, right? With the Healthcare Transparency Act that happened just recently. And so we can see the published data of, this is what is being reported that these insurances are paying these hospitals. And it is mind blowing. And so for us, we're like, okay, and we've learned a ton, like we should know what every birth costs us and like on average. And, like we never tell people not to sign contracts, but we say, know your worth, know what it costs you, because you can't. Yeah. Just you can't like lose the farm on, not negotiating, frankly. And so, and I think like birth center
or untracked expenses,
Yes, right. And also when owners are owners, they should be paid to be owners. And when owners are midwives, they should be paid to be midwives, right? Like you get paid for both. Like you get paid for the work that you do, like any other human gets paid for the work that they do.
Oh, I beat this drum all the time. In fact, I have a free downloadable sheet that will link to this show notes about the 3 jobs you have when you're a birthpreneur. You're an owner and all the business stuff. You're a midwife and all the practice or the client stuff. And then you're also always a practice manager who's setting policy and making decisions and, supply orders and all that. And so actually there's always 3 jobs that birth center owners are running, or until you have enough money to hire someone,
Yeah.
What'd you say, Petra?
Oh, I said at least 3 jobs, because there's so many other things too. But
at least, that's the bare minimum. Well, it's been such a pleasure. Where can people come check out your birth center and follow you? And are you looking for any staff, or like, can we help you out in that way?
Yeah, amazing question. Thank you. So w.gentlebirthcenter.com is our website. And we are looking for staff right now. We have a nurse midwife that's going to be having a baby soon. And so we're looking for somebody to fill her shoes. So we need a nurse midwife for that. And we're going to hire a new CPM as well. We're a lot busier than we used to be. And so there's that. We are currently hiring a medical assistant. We think we found, but if there was somebody that was a medical assistant or wanting that as an experienced student midwife, we would be interested in meeting them too.
Awesome. Well, you got the website. Any socials you want to plug?
Bella Vie _Gentle Birth Center is our Instagram. And then our Facebook, I believe, is just Bella Vie Gentle Birth Center. I should know that off the top of my head, but
it is. You're right.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll link all that in the show notes. Again, such an honor, such an inspiration. Thank you both.
Thanks so much, Augustine. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.